Welcome back. It is now my distinct privilege to introduce the moderator of our next panel. She is an IT and security hero. The bottom line up front is that we're dealing with a bona fide rock star with this moderator. With more than 28 years of IT and cybersecurity experience across all industries. I'm of course talking about Myrna Soto, who is the founder and CEO, there you are, Myrna, the founder and CEO of Apogee Executive Advisors, and they specialize in pretty much today's entire curriculum, everything involving security. She serves on more boards than Laird Hamilton. This is where I wait for laughter, but I can't hear the laughter, but that's okay. These boards include CMS Energy, Spirit Airlines, TriNet, Popular Inc., and even more. Myrna also brings an impressive and lengthy list of experiences before Apogee. She was Chief Strategy and Trust Officer for ForcePoint, COO of Digital Hands, and Senior VP and Global CISO for Comcast Corporation. She has too many awards on her shelf for me to possibly acknowledge, so I'll simply do this. I'll introduce her. Myrna, the podium and the session is all yours.
Thank you so much, John. And I am humbled and flattered by that introduction. And I'm so thrilled to be here today. I certainly will forgive John for saying the 28 years because that number is a pretty beefy number. But I'm so thrilled to be here today, most importantly, to moderate this wonderful panel with such a powerhouse group of women that are in this profession, in this field, and I'm so eager for you to meet them all. So I'm going to introduce them each very quickly, and then we'll hear a little bit more about their background shortly. Joining us today is Emily O'Carroll. She is the Senior Director, Global Information Security and IT Compliance for Callaway Golf Company. She doesn't know this, but I am secretly one of her best friends because I'm a big golfer. Tina Lavoy, who is Principal and CISO for Applied Health Concepts, and prior the Global CISO for Encore Capital. Kate Scarcella, who is the Chief Cybersecurity Architect for Security Risk and Governance, CyberRes, a micro-focused line of business. Tina Mitchell, Senior Vice President, Enterprise Security and Information Security Officer for American Specialty Health. And Cori White, Director, IT and Information Security for Continuing Life. And Shahrzad Ahmadi, CEO and founder of Klever AI. So, ladies, as I look at this screen and look at our Brady Bunch tiles, I'm thrilled to have you all join us today. I know that all of our attendees are very eager to hear from you all. John did a wonderful job introducing my background, and now I'd love for you to share with the audience your journey to the role that you are serving today. And I know that there's going to be some great stories. We obviously have a very big panel and we have a lot to cover. So I'm going to ask you each to introduce yourselves a bit further. And I'm going to confuse everyone and say, let's start with Tina. We have two. Let's start with Tina Mitchell.
Well, good morning. Thank you, Myrna. So I'll have to say that my journey is 20 plus years as well that I've been in the technical or security field. IT operations is my passion. I've been in it for so many years. It was computers when I started, right? We said computers. And many years ago, I work in healthcare or health payer. And years ago, someone said, well, we have to do security. And I said, well, I don't want to do it. And my boss said, well, somebody's got to do it. Fine. So I went ahead and studied for the CISSP and got hooked. I'm like, oh my goodness. So I more focused on IT operations for many years with security. And then about 6 years ago, went full-time dedicated to security then and didn't look back.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. Emily, let's hear from you.
Thanks, Myrna. Hi, everyone. I'm Emily O'Carroll, Senior Director of Global Information Security for Callaway Golf and our global brands. I started my journey early on in my career. I've been in the IT world for about 17 years now, but started on the risk and compliance side. performing a lot of the necessary evil audit tasks, and then was very fortunate pretty early in my career, was asked to do some technical project management for PayPal, and as part of their infrastructure security team. And it was an eye-opening and I would say life-changing experience. And when I left the consulting world, I said that I want to work for a company that I believe in and something where I'm really helping people. I think that's what a lot of us are looking for in our personal and our professional lives. And, security definitely provided that to me. And as Myrna said, people really stand behind our brand, our Callaway brand, if they love to golf. And we take a lot of pride in our company here and protecting the intellectual property that we have at the company, and security is an integral part of that.
Thank you so much, Emily. Shahrzad.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. Shahrzad here, CEO and founder of Klever AI, which is a machine learning SaaS product. I started my journey a little bit unconventional as an immigrant. A bit short of 10 years ago, I moved to this country to do my PhDs in engineering. So given my educational background, was a little bit of an obvious choice for me. It was a little bit natural and given. After graduation, I had the honor of working with the government and the DoD, modernizing VA supply chain and many other cutting edge software and systems and projects for US Air Force, Army, the Navy, and so on and so forth. After doing that for 7 years, I founded my startup in the space of IoT, Internet of Things. And currently I am working on my second startup, which is the machine learning, automated scalable machine learning app. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. We'll go to the other Tina Lavoy.
Hi, everybody. I'm Tina Lavoy, and this is actually one of my favorite questions that I'm asked. And I always thought my story was kind of unique, but now listening to the other ladies, I'm kind of going, well, we're all kind of starting from the same place. So Myrna, I think I have you beat by a couple of years in the industry. As with the other ladies, right, I have a background that started mostly in IT, and then I moved over to the risk side. And I used to think that having the background that I had in IT, I managed pretty much every discipline within an IT organization throughout my career. And I used to be very self-conscious, thinking that that was my Achilles heel, right? I was the one sitting there going, well, I'm really not a network engineer. I don't have a specialty, right? Like I just was kind of all over the place. I was a jack of all trades. And similar to Tina Mitchell, the CIO that I worked for at KPMG back in the early 2000s said, hey, we're going to start a security practice. Would you like to lead it? And I went, hell no, that's not going anywhere. And then, all right, so that opportunity passed by, but then Sarbanes-Oxley hit. And then reverse of Emily, I moved on to the risk side to start helping clients with their Sarbanes-Oxley accelerated filings. And that's when the light bulb went on for me. Like all that experience across IT helped me to better assess and understand where the risks sat within an IT organization. And then the rest was history. And here I am in information security, loving every minute of it. Thank you.
I love that story. There's a correlation we'll get to later. Kate?
Yes. So my interest actually began in technology as a child, and I was fortunate enough to be able to interact with computer games that led to an interest in technology overall. And when I'm talking computer games, I'm talking Pong. So definitely a long time ago. So, but in high school, I used to go to Radio Shack and after school and had what was called a TRS-80, which gave me the ability to connect this, tubed television with a modem with a analog handset, and used to put the handset on the modem that was a blazing speed of 1200 bits per second. We thought, whoa, this is amazing, So personally, I've seen a lot of change. Later, I got a job at a computer company where I worked in the shipping and receiving. And after hours for free, they allowed me to work on printers and all the things that they didn't want to touch, all these like older computers. And two things happened that were very beneficial for me. First, I was able to get take computer exams and certifications for free. And so I really got certified a lot. But the second part is by taking everything apart, it gave me a deep understanding in how all things worked. And then I left that position and really started my career with computers at IBM back in 1998 and had a long-term career there. And I took whatever training I was offered and would later go back to school and get my Master's of Science in Information Security.
Excellent, excellent. And last but certainly not least, Cori.
Thank you, Myrna. You know, I have to agree with Tina. I kind of expected to have this different story than everybody else, and it is very similar. My career actually started in the Army. I was in the Army and we were doing an upgrade at one of our forts, and they said, hey, we need help configuring switches. I didn't even know what a Cisco switch was at the time, but I was like, sure, I'll help out. And I started configuring all these switches, and I just fell in love from there. I went into more network operations, network engineering. When I got out of the military, you know, IBM Global Services, I started working in their NOC and really getting to know the different technologies. And then after leaving IBM, I went to a data center where, you know, more network, more systems, and, you know, we needed a systems engineer and learning about VMware. So, you know, I went and got a book and was like, okay, how do I create ESXi hosts, and really just loving it and getting into it. And then from there, you know, once I learned the infrastructure side of the house, I went into leadership and found a whole other passion there. And then from there, moving into security, you know, I tried to go the 100% security route. I was doing security assessments for BB&T Bank on the East Coast. And then Continuing Life approached me and said, hey, we're really looking at someone to lead the security side of the house. And when I come in, the tech side, was struggling a little bit. So I ended up taking over both tech and security. And, you know, what's better than healthcare and senior living. So
I love it. I love it. Thank you all for sharing your story. Like Tina Lavoy, I always thought that my story was kind of interesting, and it isn't. But just for those of you that are listening, one of the things that's wonderful about the stories that you've just heard is the reality that we all have very distinct paths. And we'll talk a little bit more about kind of what we're doing and what we'd like to see in the industry. But my story, I was a psychology major, thought I was going to be a therapist, quickly abandoned that when I got into the business world. And I was a business leader who was starved for technology, became a very squeaky wheel, got sucked into an IT organization. And later on, probably about mid through my early stage of my career, I also had a boss who said, guess what? I need somebody to run security. It's yours. I went home that night. I cried. I thought it was going to be the end of my career. And it was the best thing that I've ever done. And this is why we want to promote more and more women in this profession, because it is such a fulfilling career. So with that said, I know that we're all very strong advocates for women in the field. We're advocates for the profession in general. What I'd love to hear from you all, and I won't assign who wants to answer. I'll let you guys decide what you want to contribute on this one. We certainly have a lot of women that are listening to us today, and we have our male counterparts that are also tuning in today. But what would be your words of wisdom and advice to those that are listening that are interested in the field or very interested in progressing more in the field? They just heard about all of our backgrounds, much of which we have some chance, some determination, some support. What would be your words of wisdom to those that are listening? think, Tina, you want to go ahead?
Sure. So you just said a phrase that I didn't think about it when I was thinking about this question, but the best advice I would give is be yourself, right? So being true to yourself is probably a way to think about any career, but in this one specifically, it's a wonderful, wonderful field, and I couldn't be more blessed to have kind of fallen into it the way I have, but it's not for the faint of heart either, right? So being a squeaky wheel sometimes is necessary. Sometimes being what might feel overly assertive can be a little unnerving, but sometimes you need to trust your instincts, trust your gut. If you do find yourself in a leadership position as a security expert, always be mindful, right, that our role is essentially to critique somebody else's work. So, and I think I've learned this over the years, right, where you come in as a little bit of a stormtrooper, and you're basically insulting the people in the room. So you want to perfect your delivery. I also think that, yeah, there's a lot of technical things that need to be sorted through from an information security profession, right? It's still a fairly new field, and there's a lot of barriers to break down from a technical perspective, but also from not just women in technology, just people in technology, right? There's a lot of political tension, I'll say, sometimes between, where should the CISO report? Should the CISO report under the CIO? And then there's potential conflicts there. Should the CIO report to the CISO? So you're going to have technical problems to deal with. You're going to have political problems to contend with. But if you like leading the way for others, this is your time.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. Anyone else? Any other pearls? Shahrzad?
Hey, I want to shed some light into this from my perspective. I participate in a lot of conferences of women in tech, minority women in tech, women with Middle Eastern background in tech, all sorts you can imagine. And one thing we all collectively agree in these conferences as participants and as speakers is that although we have come a long way, a very, very long way in terms of closing the gender gap in tech, we still collectively agree that we need more women in leadership positions and executive positions in tech. We need simply more women coming in and leading divisions, departments, companies, and to be honest, countries at this point. And for that, I had a social experiment a couple of months ago, and I want to share with you was that I had this job opening for my company. And I literally just wanted a senior machine learning engineer, but I called it a chief machine learning scientist when I was posting the job. And I was monitoring the candidates very carefully to see what kind of people applied for this position. And it was a very attractive position. So a lot of applicants, hundreds of them, right, on a weekly basis, from different experiences, educational background, different races. One thing they all had in common, guess what? They were all men, no female whatsoever applied for that. Got me a tad depressed, but made me realize that we have underlying issues. So my first and foremost advice for those women in tech will be just be fearless. Get out of your comfort zone. Put yourself out there. Don't sell yourself short. If you see a position, go for it, apply for it. If you see a senior and executive level position, you never know what the hiring manager behind that is thinking about. Secondly, network. Don't ignore that. It's a very important thing. Do not use your network wisely and properly and network properly. The third one I would say is basically, in that sense, I would say learn stuff very fast. So learn as much as you can, as fast as you can, and be very confident about it. I used to have a saying that tell my other younger generation in tech, get used to speak a little louder, walk a little taller, which basically means just be confident and be passionate about what you're saying. In my personal experience, in any organization, if people see that you know your stuff, you're very knowledgeable, and you talk about them with passion and confidence, men and women, they celebrate you and they lend you a hand.
I love that advice. And definitely stretch. Apply for those roles, even if you don't think you're 100% qualified, because 80% is going to get you in the door, and then you're going to bring such a significant diversity of thought and leadership to the table. Cori, I think you had your hand up. You wanted to share?
And yeah, thank you. Agreeing both. I don't be afraid to ask questions, because when in our industry, we work with such strong personalities, right? We have, our engineers, our architects, our leaders, we all have very big egos, and it's part of our environment. And so we have a tendency not to ask questions, especially as women. We get in a room full of men, and we kind of expect that maybe, we may not know as much as them, or we don't want to be seen as weak or not as smart. And so we don't ask the questions that we don't know. So my advice would really be to ask the questions. There's never a dumb question. And so making sure that you're speaking up, that you're getting the knowledge you need, whatever the environment, whether it be at school or at your job or at a networking event, making sure that you find your voice and that you're able to be able to ask those questions.
Excellent. Thank you. I should have mentioned this before, because it's one of the reasons why I was so excited about moderating this panel and supporting this event. Is not only do we need to follow the advice that the ladies have already shared, but we need more companies to sponsor women in these fields, in these professions. And Evotech is a great example with their Women in Technology Scholarship Fund. I know many of you mentioned, learn fast, be dedicated. I love the Radio Shack example. You took me back, Kate, to early days tinkering at Radio Shack. And it's really about continuous learning as well. So kudos to Evotech for their scholarship fund. Anyone else want to share any words of wisdom before we get into some technical areas? Emily.
Yes, I would say as you progress through your career journey, identify who your advocates can be as well. Identify who you're going to have people throughout your career that you're more comfortable asking these questions to. And I 100% agree with Cori. In those meetings, don't hesitate to ask questions. After those meetings, debrief with your leaders or your peers to see how they felt it went. And maybe that's an opportunity, if you aren't confident asking the question, if it's a large meeting with many, many people in there, you can ask in those debrief sessions. I know I had a session with one of our new board members just yesterday. And that's, I texted our CIO right afterwards and said, hey, can we debrief on this? I think it went well, but I want your feedback. That's really important. Also, speak up for yourself. Make sure that others, especially for our male peers that are part of this conversation, they may not recognize when they may miss having a seat at the table for the women on the team. This is a specific example for Callaway Golf, but I have a feeling that many organizations, a lot of deals, a lot of conversations are happening on the golf course. And I have an example from several years back where the invitation was not even extended to me. I'm not an avid golfer, although you may think you have to be working for Callaway, but I'm not. But I do golf, recreationally every so often. But because I'm not an avid golfer, the invitation was not even extended to me, which I stepped aside with one of my peers that organized the event. And I said, one of our security vendors is at this event, and I wasn't even at the table to have these discussions, wasn't part of those discussions. And he said, I thought you wouldn't even want to play. And I said, well, regardless, I know you're having beers after you golf. You're probably having lunch before you golf. Even if I do decide not to attend the golf event, I'd love to be there for part of the social engagements before or after. So it's important, we need to speak up for each other as well. Sometimes our peers may just not recognize that the seat isn't there for us. So look for those opportunities. I know that for myself, I try with the other women in IT, I try to meet with them periodically, coordinate lunches, although that's hard to do nowadays, but check in with them, especially if you are in a leadership position, check in with your team members, see how they're doing, even cross-functional team members.
That is great advice. And I will admit, I took up the game of golf for that reason.
Yep.
Well, it was the one opportunity, and of course, I was being sold to, and salespeople wanted to spend time with me, but it was the one opportunity to have 3+ hours captive on the golf course, and I caught the bug afterwards. So that's a pitch for Callaway, definitely. All right, so we're going to move on to some more discussion about cybersecurity. As you all know, the cybersecurity space is extremely complex. The threat landscape continues to grow at an exponential rate. I'd love to hear from some of you, and I'm going to call upon a few of you right now. Tell us what you are seeing in your sectors and your industry as some of the largest challenges from a cybersecurity perspective. And when I'm speaking of this, we both know that there's a lot of technology imperatives, but then there's also some business imperatives. So I'd love to hear from your perspective on either side of the table or both. So let's start with Kate.
So, and for those who know me, won't be surprised when I say this, but when I began working in the field of cybersecurity, we used to ask our customers, what keeps you up at night? And honestly, I was sleeping really well in those days. However, today it's a much different story because I'm deeply concerned about IoT. How do we secure the 14 billion devices now? How do we get the visibility into those devices? And in 2025, it's projected to be 1 trillion. So for me, I take a deep breath and I think, we have an issue here, and we really need to address this because how do we bring this visibility into our SOCs? How do we address the business challenges of the data that we're getting from these devices? Is it accurate data? Because we're making business decisions today based on that data. So if that data is compromised, then the decisions that we're making is also compromised. And so that to me is really something that is keeping me up at night.
Sleeping like a baby. I don't remember what that's like. Tina Mitchell, how about you?
For me, it's about measuring and communicating risk is I see the big challenge right now. When we first started out and you're building a program, it was pretty easy. Oh, you need a camera over here. You need firewall there because it was missing, right? It's easy to communicate and measure that risk, and qualitative risk analysis was enough. But now that your programs have matured, at least, you get to the point, how do you identify what you should invest in and what you should not, what's first? And so that's where I see moving into risk quantification. I know that some larger companies have already been there, but for smaller programs, this is new of us getting into being able to speak the board of directors language in dollars and cents. So that's where I see is that moving into quantification that's not always taught in all of the certifications and degrees that we have obtained. So that's one of the challenges I see, and that's where my focus has been.
Awesome. Let me pivot to the other Tina.
Thank you. So I would say similar to Tina, right? There's so many things from a technical perspective that we're dealing with as gaps. As Kate had mentioned, right? The Internet of Things is it's a big hole and has been for a while, and it's growing. But I subscribe to, and what I see a lot of, it goes back to the basics, right? People, process, technology. So one, there's a lack of resources in the security field in general. So welcome in, right? Come on in. Even if you don't have all the criteria, give it a whack, right? So once you get the people part straightened out, what I see a lot of is process still lacking in a lot of companies. And unless you have the people and the processes in place operating effectively on a regular basis, you can buy all the tools and products you want, but you need those people and you need those processes to make them effectively, to be able to use them effectively in your organization. So I'll pause there, right? I think that getting the people and the processes in place is what I see predominantly lacking in a lot of organizations, and then quantifying how you prioritize solving what's missing.
Excellent, excellent. Shahrzad, I'm going to go to you now. I know that you'll have a very unique perspective as you are a founder of an organization in the process of doing another, and you're trying to address some of these challenges. So I'd love to hear from you.
Of course. Thank you. One of the things that I mentioned is that how we use cutting edge technology without introducing more risks and threat, as Kate said, into our networks, right? Like IoT, a lot of benefits of Internet of Things, but how can we prevent that from threatening our network more and putting our network more at risk? The same with AI and machine learning, what we are doing right now at Klever AI, and I'm sure a lot of other folks that are in the space of AI and machine learning, that they do that. And what keeps us at night is that how we can use, and we know that AI and machine learning can help a lot. Why? Because technologies like machine learning, NLP, natural language processing, they can help a lot in terms of identifying patterns that are just humanly impossible to identify, right? So we can be way more proactive, preventive, and predictive about those patterns. So I think one of the complexity right now is that, hey, we want to use technologies to help with the cybersecurity, be smarter about it, because the cyber attacks are growing so much in complexity that you no longer just with an operational analyst can identify them, right? So we are aware that we need AI, ML, blockchain, IoT, all of those technologies, but the complexity is how not to let them create more risk inside your network.
That's great insights, great insights. Cori, how about you?
Thanks. Similar to everyone else, I think it's just, security, keeping up with innovation. Working for a senior healthcare company, there's a lot of IoT devices, there's, TVs, there's Alexas, and how do we secure all of that and create a secure environment for our residents? And we have a unique customer base. We have residents that are 80 plus years old. So really trying to keep up with the business, especially during the pandemic where, we're having staffing challenges. So, for business purposes, we're bringing in robots and we're trying to become more innovative, but then, we're reacting from a security standpoint instead of being proactive. And I think that's been one of our biggest challenges.
And I would imagine that, and this could be a whole other panel that we'll all get together again on to talk about privacy. You have, challenges with security, privacy. And I've heard, risk management is a common theme. Could not agree more. Emily, what are you thinking?
Well, I'll bring up something that was probably keeping us all up at night right before the holidays, the Log4j, Log4Shell vulnerability. I think that it was very interesting timing, and we were, I think that as security professionals, it's not black and white all the time. It's not just, oh, look at that CVSS score and you can, remediate that vulnerability immediately and without considering all the other business impacts of doing so and things like that. And it's really, I found that, and I think everyone on this panel has addressed this already today, but it goes beyond just the technical information and the technical skill set. It really is that collaboration across your organization, understanding of the business. I think as we all progress as leaders in our careers, it's really, you have to have that business acumen and business understanding. So as someone mentioned before, so that you can communicate with the board and things like that. But I love to, Myrna, hearing your background. I've seen over the years some of the most talented engineers that I've worked with come from a non-IT degree, what they went to university for. Like one of the most talented engineers on my team he was art history. He has his bachelor's in art history. And I think creativity in the security world is incredibly important. We need to be flexible. We need to be able to adapt. We need to be able to identify. I love when I get to go back to my roots and talk about compensating controls that could mitigate that 10 CVSS score that we're seeing, right? But yeah, I think really maturing the program, the people, and the processes, like Tina said, going beyond just the tools. We can pay all the money in the world to put all these tools in place. But if they're just sitting there on the shelf, not monitoring the correct assets, et cetera, what good and value is that really bringing to the organization?
That's fantastic. And that's going to lead into my next question perfectly. But before I go to that question, I'll have to share that actually many of the CIOs that I had the pleasure of working for throughout my career, one was an art major, the other was an English major. None of them were from technology fields, which is quite amazing. And so I couldn't agree with you more that there is that ability to kind of bring other perspectives to the table and brilliantly bring in this creativity. So we talked about risk management. We talked about the things that keep us up at night. We talked about investing in technologies and not necessarily utilizing them to its greatest effectiveness. Talked about AI and machine learning. Let's talk about how we manage all the things that we need to do for our organizations and the value of partnerships. You know, we have vendors, we have suppliers. I always am a big proponent of considering them partners in the ecosystem. I'd love to hear from all of you what you see the value of partnerships. If you've got a tidbit or a story that you could share, don't have to be a commercial for any one particular company, but definitely what's worked well with you as you have built partnerships throughout your career. And I'll start with Cori.
So not to plug Evotech, but we, 2 days ago, we sat in a room with, I think it was 7 different architects from Evotech, and getting my team and their team together to really lay out our entire infrastructure and really architect for security. You can't really get a better partner than that. Our business is a little on the smaller side, so we can't go out and hire a bunch of security architects. So partnering with Evotech to be able to do that, to get the brain power and help us make a secure environment, that is truly priceless for us.
Awesome. Tina Mitchell, what can you share?
When I think about partnerships, I think about all the professional organizations that are out there that you can join. That networking is so important. To be able to bounce ideas off your colleagues is wonderful. We have a great CISO roundtable here in San Diego. I'm part of some other groups, but that's one thing I would say, take advantage of the groups that are out there and do some networking.
Kate?
So one of the working for large companies for the majority of my career, what I found is that I really enjoy the startups and being able to work with a startup that has an idea and they just need some help in getting their idea into the larger audience. So
awesome. Tina, the other Tina.
Okay, so I think in business school, one of the most valuable things that I learned was build your network before you need it. And I would say early in my career, I didn't really understand what was meant by networking. I thought it was going to a lot of different groups and being a member. It's not that. It's so much more. You have to actually participate. You have to volunteer to do speaking events, even if it's outside of your comfort zone. You want to volunteer to be a mentor, even if it's not a formal role. Get involved, be an offer of help to other people, and reciprocate. And as I think Tina Mitchell mentioned, we have a CISO roundtable here in San Diego and a perfect example of that network in action that was built before we needed it. So before the holidays, as Emily pointed out, when we were all facing a pretty big challenge, that entire network was reaching out to each other, helping each other, giving each other templates and tools and ideas of how to tackle the problem. Participating in those networking forums is the key, participation.
Awesome. Thank you. Emily.
Yeah, I'd like to say for just a recommendation especially for the participants that maybe are earlier on in their careers as well, and our leaders for that matter. I think we talked about networking is huge. Partnering with our vendors is huge. It's important to bring your team members to the table as well and make them aware of the opportunities. Also, you know, we have subject matter experts on our teams that they may have opportunities to speak on behalf of a vendor, encourage those opportunities. I know when I come and speak on panels like this, things like that, I'll reach beyond just our security team to other women in technology to say, hey, you know, if you can attend, I'll be speaking on this panel. It also, you know, it helps boost other women in the field, helps boost their confidence that they can do this too. And if they work at your organization, also helps them see like, hey, my company is supportive of me participating in these types of conferences, panels, etc. So I think it's really important for us as leaders to lift up our team members and make sure that they know that these types of networking events, that they are important, and we do want to foster that career growth.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you for that. Shahrzad.
I'll make this quick. I echo what Tina said in terms of networking. Don't always be on the receiving side of your networking. Give more and you'll finally eventually receive some.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you all for sharing that insight on partnerships. Early in my career, I made it a mission of mine because I was out of my element when I got thrown into the security space to really, really leverage the partnerships that I could with my vendors and my suppliers. And to Tina's comment before, volunteer, show up, offer yourself. And it ended up being one of the most significant tools in my career. And I often was told, this is unusual for us. We usually are getting beat up. We're usually getting beat up on price. We're usually getting beat up on this. And they really appreciated it. And when I had crisis, they always answered the phone. And that's really important for everyone to remember. All right, we're going to go move into lightning round because we only have a few minutes left. And what I'd love to hear from each of you is, if we are all here, sitting here next year, we've talked about machine learning, AI, risk management. We talked about a bunch of different areas of focus for cybersecurity. If we're here a year from now, in 3 or 4 words or less, what are we talking about when it comes to cybersecurity? I'm going to pause for a minute because no one knew I was going to ask this question. And I'll start with Kate.
I think we're going to be talking more about artificial intelligence and machine learning. I think it's about augmenting humans, especially as we just don't have people in the field. And so we have to think about more about how we're using our AI and ML to augment humans to help us.
Tina Mitchell.
You know, we started off talking about the 20+ years experience. I think we're going to be talking about succession planning. It's going to be a big topic as we hopefully move closer to retirement, be ready to retire.
I love that. I love that. I have failed at retirement 3 times. I love it. I'll pivot to the other Tina Lavoy.
I think we're going to be talking about how companies have matured from implementing and managing their risk and the evolution and the development in that space.
Cori, what are your thoughts?
I think I have to agree with Kate. I think we're going to be talking a lot about AI and how our data drives that and how we secure that.
Shahrzad?
I might be a little biased here, but how AI and machine learning can help with spaces like cybersecurity.
And last but not least, Emily.
I would echo everything that the folks said. The other thing that I feel bad saying, but increased regulation. I think we're going to see more and more of it. I know privacy, you know, there's the new PIPL law for our partners in China. They're not done yet. So I think the increased regulation and compliance requirements, unfortunately, but you know, that's good job security for all of us as well, right?
There is certainly a benefit to regulatory influence as long as it maintains a practical business mindset.
Yes.
So I will share with you what I think we're going to be talking about. I think we're going to be talking about the biases and the ethical use of machine learning and artificial intelligence. But that's for another day. Well, I want to thank you all so much for joining us today. I want to thank each and every one of you ladies for sharing your insights, your perspectives. I learned a lot. I'm sure our attendees also learned a lot. I apologize I had the traffic cop. We have a pretty big panel, but you all did an excellent job. Thank you so much. And I'm going to turn it over back to John.
Thank you, Myrna. You were traffic cop, but you were awesome. So yeah, as predicted, you and the panel all completely knocked this out of the park. I know that you were all extremely busy dropping words of wisdom, so likely weren't focused on the session comments, but I can tell you that in summary, you guys were loved. So great job. Thank you many, many, many times over. Okay, everybody, this ends the main stage panel portion of the Security Summit. Next up will be the sessions, which have been selected with much relevance and care, and those are going to begin in 5 minutes. So I will see all of you in one of these sessions. Looking forward to it. Thank you all.